everybody, welcome back to my channel, The Medieval Reader. So today's Medieval Monday video is technically not medieval. The story I'm going to be talking about takes place in the 16th century, so it's technically the Renaissance. But since I tend to film on Monday, I thought I might as well make a video on Monday. I think that is the day that you expect me to upload, and it's kind of medieval, depending on how you look at it. It does take place in the first half of the 16th century, so right at the start of what is considered the Renaissance in France. Today I will be discussing the trial of a peasant named Methane Gas, whose story was told by Natalie Zemon in her book, The Return of Methane Gas. Natalie Zemon is an author that all pre-modern history lovers should know. Like Emmanuel Leroy-Ladurie, whose narrative history on the Albigensian peasants in southern France, Montaillou, which I made a video about a little over a year ago. Natalie Zemon brings archival material to life. She's interested in what registers reveal about everyday life in the Ancien Régime. I was introduced to Davis last summer when we were assigned Fiction in the Archives, which is about pardon tales. So pardon tales were stories, true stories, written by people accused of various crimes so that they would not be executed, so that they could get a lighter sentence. And so there's a lot of rhetoric in these stories, and Davis writes all about that. She takes a literary lens to legal documents. This was great. And in her own way, she does the same thing in The Return of Methane Gas, except she focuses more on the sociological dimension. She focuses more on what this story might tell us about marriage and family among peasants in Toulouse, southern France, in the early 16th century. And Davis also argues that Methane Gas was most likely Protestant. Certainly, the one who wrote about him, Jean de Corras, was Protestant. He was a militant Calvinist who was eventually executed shortly after the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. But the primary reason I decided to read her book on Methane Gas is because she was the consultant for the film adaptation Le Retour de Methane Gas. It's a French film, which I saw twice, once in high school in French class, and once as an undergrad. It was, I think, my freshman year. So this is a film that at least people in the United States, when they're learning French, teachers will use it to teach French history. And it is a pretty good film. I would definitely recommend it. I will certainly be spoiling the story of Methane Gas, so if you don't want to be spoiled, then you shouldn't watch this video. So who is Methane Gas? Methane Gas was, originally his family was from the Basque region, but he moved up north to southern France, where he married Bertrande de Rolls. Bertrande was most likely from a Protestant family, Martin as well, and they got married, at least according to Jean de Corras, who, like I said, is the one who wrote about this trial. He was one of the judges, so he was the most, he was the nearest to the case. According to him, they got married at 9 or 10. Davis argues that they might have actually gotten married later, but 9 or 10 was really young. But they got married anyway. It was a marriage of convenience. For 10 years, they were only able to have one child, a son named Sanxi. And that's because Methane Gas had issues with infertility, which was a huge scandal. The family was really dealing with the shame of not being able to produce many children. Then one day, Martin stole from his own father, and his father had him imprisoned, and then eventually he was in exile, so he left France and was in Spain, where he also fought for the Spanish king, so he committed treason. And then a man returns, a man who claims to be Methane Gas. He reintroduces himself to Bertrande's family, so that they know that he is the real man. Bertrande is seemingly convinced that this is her real husband. He knows intimate details about her life, including perhaps their sexual life. And so he returns. And in a 5-year period, they have 3 children. But this Methane Gas has been selling property that belonged to his uncle, and so his uncle Pierre is not happy, and he is convinced that this man is an imposter. Eventually, Bertrand comes around to Pierre's side and actually takes this man, Martin, or maybe not, to court. There are 2 trials. The first trial is the trial at Guerre, where they are, and he is condemned. And then there is the trial by the Parlement of Toulouse, where he is also condemned. So basically, had been rumors that the real Methane Gas had actually been injured at war, that he only had one leg, one of his legs was amputated, and that he had returned, and he was in Toulouse. And he did attend the trial, and during the trial, Bertrand and her family recognized him for who he was, and so there was just no doubt in anyone's mind of who the real man was. But the fact that Martin was able to deceive people for so many years is what Davis finds so fascinating. Because Jean de Corras claims that Bertrand was innocent up until the very end. She truly believed that man was the real deal, was her real husband. But Davis finds that a bit hard to believe. How can somebody whom you are married to resemble somebody else so closely that you just can't tell one from the other? Davis really believes that Bertrand knew and that she really benefited from this imposter. That here's this man who, unlike the real Martin, is able to give her children, who might be a more interesting person, and who perhaps the family didn't care was an imposter until Pierre really pushed it. So I don't know. I really do think that Bertrand probably knew. It's really hard to believe that she wouldn't know. The imposter was Arnaud Dutil, who had a reputation for being a womanizer because he was just running around with a bunch of women. He was a bachelor and he was living it up, and he met Martin, who probably gave him quite a bit of information about his wife and knew that this guy had a lot of property and thought, well, I'll just take this guy's wife. So he did. So what happened? Arnaud Dutil was hanged after doing the amende honorable, which is this penitential rite that he had to undergo before he was executed. And what's really interesting is that Jean de Corras, in his account of the trial, so he was the one who wrote the account of the trial officially, but then he also includes 111 annotations, which are these really long commentaries on the trial. And what is interesting is that he takes this trial and makes it into this moral lesson about marriage, about family, about friendship. And that, I think, is what's missing in Davis's account of Methane Gas's story, is all of these annotations that Jean de Corras has included. They're not really studied at any great length in the book. At times they're alluded to. But honestly, Jean de Corras has some, what I like to call, hot takes about marriage that are really shocking, especially for 20th and 21st century eyes. He says things about children, about women, about, female development, about reproduction that are just super surprising and interesting. And at every point, this trial becomes an occasion for him to tell people about how he feels marriage and family should run. The other thing is, I would have liked to have seen more about Bertrand de Rose, because she's this woman who may or may not have been aware that Martin is an imposter, maybe more about, her experience. But I think in general, this is definitely still a very good and important, very highly readable, by the way, history about peasant life in the 16th century, and gives you a lot of information about just small details about their day-to-day lives, taken mostly actually from other historical writings of the period, so not necessarily in Jean de Corras's account itself. Now, his account is known as the Arrêt Mémorable. In case you want to look it up, I will link it below. But yeah, that is the story of Methane Gas. I will definitely link below my video on Montaillou, which is about peasants in the, I think it's 14th or 13th centuries. I don't remember what century it's in, but it is during the Albigensian Crusade. So yeah, let me know if you have ever seen the film Le Retour de Methane Gas, and I will talk to you later. Bye now.